Hey everybody. Alright, in continuation with the Hotend series of videos here, I'm going to talk about a blown up Hotend. I did say that if I could find one, I would do a video on trying to recover it. This one is pretty much screwed. As you can see, it had a massive leak. It's not as bad as most cases because the electronics side of things was still not encased. And typically what happens is this will get down over the screw and the end of this heating element and fuse everything together, and you can't get it apart at all. Now, I will say before I begin this video, if you're going to watch this video for recovery purposes, yes, these can be recovered. However, you can get this entire assembly, thermistor, Hotend, heater, the whole thing, sometimes even the shroud, for anywhere between $12 to $25. So you have to really wonder when you're thinking about recovering a Hotend like this, is it worth it? It really depends on your budget, and it really depends on how much you really want to put into doing this. I'm only going to do this for this video. This was headed for basically for the trash. I would recover any electronic components such as the element, whatever I could, boat and tube, probably this radiator. Anything I could recover from it I would, and reuse it if I needed to. But this part of it's probably junk. Okay, having said that about the electronics, typically if this does happen to you and it does flow over the thermistor, 9 times out of 10 that thermistor's not coming out okay. It's possible to get them out of the plastic with enough heat, but you're more likely have already going to damage the wires. If you haven't damaged them during the heating process, when you're pulling on them, you probably will. Those thermistors are like $5 5-pack for like $10. I mean, it's just not worth the hassle. So if it comes to that, just snip your resistor or your thermistor wire, and if you want to try to remove this, you can. This has obviously already been removed. The grub screw is missing, and this was not part of this. I just put this in to show you, as part of the complete video. So I would remove the scrub screw and I would work this out of the way to recover this Hotend. Okay. Now during this video I'm going to be using the heat gun. So it's going to be kind of loud. So if you're wearing headphones, just keep in mind. I'll try to give you a warning when I'm going to be using heat gun. So it's going to be extensive because I need to get this plastic out of here and get this all apart and cleaned out. Got my usual suspects for tools as I normally would for working on Hotends, and I've also got their big brothers over here. Some of these things will be needed to get this apart. Now, having said that, sometimes when you're using these kinds of tools, these big guys on these little things, the little things don't always survive. This is not a guaranteed recovery. I will attempt it, but the most common thing is the heat throat itself will be so stuck in this block that when I go to remove it, I'm going to scar it up really bad with the pliers, and I won't be able to put the radiator back on, the heatsink. So again, keep in mind that when you get to this point, a lot of times it's really just worth it to throw it out, get another one, recover the parts you can, put them in the parts box, but for the most part, it's just going to save you so much trouble. As you'll see if you watch this video to the end, it's going to be interesting. Alright, so I'm going to get started on this. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just remove my compression fitting here. Just grab my wrench. There's no chance of really pulling this tube out when it's jammed up like this. Chances are your best bet is just to remove this as one unit if you can. Sometimes it comes out, most times it won't. Yep, that's not going to. So we're just going to slide the compression fitting back. That's stuck in there. So we're going to go ahead and start with the heat. I'm going to turn this on, it's going to be loud. So if you're using your headphones, watch out. And I'm just going to heat this up. Now when you're using a hot gun like this, you have to watch out for your hands. This stuff's going to get very hot. It's very easy to get burned. So be very careful with this. That should be enough heat to get this out. Nope. Okay, there we go. So I was able to at least get the tube out of the way. Again, now this is hot. So you want to be careful when you're touching this. You can get easily burned doing this. Use your tools or gloves. I don't bother with gloves because I have a hard time feeling stuff that I need to feel. I just use tools. I really should use gloves. It's smarter, but it's not that hot yet. This will get really hot though. Alright, so for now, I can't get this out. Oh yeah, that's hot. So I'm going to go ahead and cut that off. It's all going to come apart when I take it apart anyway, so I'm just going to snip this out of the way. So, it's gone. Also, be careful of the surface you're working on. Remember, everything here is really hot. It can melt your tabletop or whatever you're working on. Make sure you're not damaging anything in the process. Don't get in trouble. Okay, well, that would be mom, wife, whatever. My workshop, everything's pretty much destroyed anyway from working on stuff, so... Alright, so this is hot still, remember, don't forget. I'm going to heat this up some more. What I'm going to try to do is get the bulk of this plastic off of here, try to get the nozzle out, and see if I can't start working on getting these screws out and get this whole thing kind of apart. The grub screw is okay. I should be able to sneak in there and get that loose. Let me just see if I can do that real quick. Yeah, that's fine. These guys, they might have a little bit of plastic in them. Yeah, they do. So I'll heat that up and soften it and try to get the tool in there to get the screw heads loosened up and get those out. Alright, here we go. Alright, so we're able to get pretty much all of it apart. Let's see if I can get this apart real quick. Yep, it's nice and loose. What did I do with those other pliers? 1 second, guys. You know, sometimes you have moments in life. I'm thinking about these pliers. Where did I put them? Where did I put those pliers? They're in my hand holding the hot end. Oh, yeah, sometimes the coffee just isn't enough. Alright, so what I'm doing here is I'm just turning this and removing it from the heat break while it's still really, really, really hot. There we go. Okay, now you'll see there's some plastic on here. And this should slide right out of this. I got lucky here in doing it this way so far. Just gonna make sure this grub screw is loose enough. I haven't damaged any threads. I haven't damaged anything at all so far. And that is actually going to come out. So there we go. We've got this radiator out of the way. Wow, that's hot. Okay, you might have noticed even when I was taking these screws out during the video, they were smoking. That's how hot everything was. This heat gun is no joke. It will get everything really, really hot. And as I usually say in these videos when I'm using this thing, watch out for this. It will stay really hot for a really long time, and it will burn you if you touch it. So, and I mean burn like blisters instantly. So I'm just going to slide that out of my way, and I'm going to make sure it doesn't fall over and catch anything on fire, because it's actually really dangerous right now when it's that hot. So be very mindful what you're doing when you're doing this stuff. Alright, I might not need it again. I might have to go back to using it, depending on what I can get out of here. This is still pretty warm, so I might be able to slide this out. These pliers are not really holding on to this. Let me get those other ones. Now, when you're using pliers like this on this soft aluminum, make sure you're being careful not to mar everything up and damage stuff. It is possible very easily to hurt this aluminum and deform it and everything else. So don't be going Hulk strength on this when you're doing this. Of course, that cut off there. I knew that was going to happen. Alright, so I might have to heat this some more. I'm trying to get that cleared. There's a blockage right here. So, also make sure stuff isn't falling into your hot gun or on your hot gun to start a fire. Just be mindful of everything with this. This is, as long as you pay attention, you're fine, but it's pretty dangerous stuff. Alright, here we go. And Q-tips are a great way to remove plastic. And it's still not melted. There we go. Get that back. This top part's pretty messy. It's going to be a little tougher to clean. It's kind of really caked in here and does not want to go off. This is probably a long time of leaking and built up on here pretty good. So even if you can't get it perfectly clean, that's okay. You don't have to. You just have to make sure there's no plastic like inside of anything that's going to be affected by threads or screws or anything like that. So typically what I'll do now is I actually bought some special hardware for this. Alright, so what I bought when I was at the hardware stores, I brought along a heat block and a throat, and I found the hardware that fits the threads. I don't remember exactly what size it was. I'd tell you if I remembered, but anyway. The reason why I bought this is a lot of times there's plastic that's in the threads that you can't get out. And it's hard to get it out by heating it and using Q-tips. It doesn't always get it all. But if you use something like this and you thread it all the way in, eventually you hit some resistance. It's just plastic. So you can use it to chase out that plastic by tightening it. And it'll push it out. So you go all the way through. Just like that. And then once you've done it by hand, you can use a tool. If if you have a tool like this to make it go quicker. So I'm going to pull it back out. And I send it through again. And you can actually hear the tool resisting when it hits that spot where there's still some plastic. Now you don't. It's gone. It's clean. So there you go. Those threads are nice and clean in there. I'm going to just clean these up. And again, make sure you're watching your hands with this stuff. Be careful. So now we're going to just clean up this guy. You can just get the, it's nice and cooled off now. You can get the hardened plastic off with your hands for the most part. And usually I can get this to go through a nut that matches the thread just like the other half of it. So hold on to that and see if I can't get it to go. Just moving it back and forth. If it doesn't want to go, then you guessed it, we're going to heat it up. And what I'll do is I'll hold it down here as low as I can go with this. And I think this wrench fits this. It does. So what we're going to do is we don't want to hold this too high because I tried not to mark this up. But we're going to have to put some bite on this to hold it while we heat it up and get the plastic to run out of the threads. So I'm going to take the nut off. Well, actually I'll leave it on. I was going to take it off, but getting it started on the hot end will suck. So we'll just we'll loosen it a little bit and we'll heat it up. Alright, so as you can see there, we were able to get all the way through the threads now. Dropping stuff again. And chase it all the way down. Extremely hot hardware right here. So I'm just going to kind of back it off with the wrench until it gets close to the end. And drop it on my desk. And not touch it because it's hot. Ooh, that's hot, 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 hot. Yeah, insert your jokes here. I'm sure you got them. There you go. As you can see, that's what came out of it. There was still quite a bit lining the walls of this from that jam up. And obviously it was black plastic that they were using. So of course it comes out black. It might come out black just from being heated too long and burning. That's how that's supposed to go. It goes right through. It's a little tight, but it'll slide through there and comes out nice and clean now. I can see down in the tube if I look closely that it's nice and clean again. So now I'm going to start putting this back together, but chances are I'm going to have to let stuff cool off if it's too hot to work with. This nozzle is just toast. I'm not going to bother with it. Like I said, you get these really, really, really cheap off the internet, usually in a bag of them, so I don't bother trying to save the nozzles. I don't think it's worth it. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead with the reassembly process of this. I've let these things cool down enough where I think I can handle them alright without them burning me anymore. It's important to notice and pay attention to when you're putting this back together again. This side with the filleted holes is the bottom. This is the nozzle side. This side with the flush holes is the top, or the heat brake side. So I'm going to get our heat brake started in here. Not going to go too crazy with that, as I want to have enough room for the nozzle to set where I want it, and then we'll tighten it down to the nozzle. So we're going to set the nozzle first, and I'm just going to set that down to about where I want it in the block. I don't want a whole lot. I don't want it tight all the way. I want to leave a gap, about a thread. That's what's there right now. I don't know if you can see it. Hopefully you can. And I'm going to go ahead and bring this down tight, and once that stops, I'll snug the nozzle to it. So what I'm doing is I'm tightening the nozzle against the heat brake. Nothing to do with the block. It's not touching the block. That goes back to what we're talking about in the other video with this. What you're seeing right there is this. The nozzle is gapped. Let's fix our model here. Okay. The nozzle is gapped out like so, and these two are making a seal inside of this block. Okay, this block is doing nothing but holding everything together like a sandwich. This is putting all its pressure on this part. This part is putting all its pressure on this part, and that makes it so plastic cannot escape this. More of this model is in the previous video when I talk about hot ends. Okay, let's go back to putting this together. So that's what's happening here now. That's what you just saw in the model. We have the gap there. The threads of this, or the top of this, is meeting the bottom of this. This is just holding everything together. So now I'm going to go ahead and reinstall the heat sink itself, like so. And we're going to go ahead and install these bolts. Clean them up the best I can. They're kind of messy, but they'll be alright. They're just going to be threaded in, they'll hold in there fine. So we'll go ahead and tighten these down. All I'm doing is I'm running them down to where they seat. I'm not tightening them just yet. Okay, once they seat out like that, I start going back and forth and tightening these so I keep it straight. It's possible to bend this, that's why. You don't want to bend it. So tighten and tighten. So now it's both the same. I can go ahead and sock them down good. You want to make sure these are really good and tight. You don't want them to come loose. If they come loose, it can cause your hot end to wobble and cause weird problems with your prints that you'll be chasing, trying to figure it out when all it is a couple of loose screws right here. So if you get uneven layer lines or anything weird, you can't find any other reason for it, check these screws and these screws. Make sure everything is tight. Alright, so now that's assembled. The next step would be we would assemble in our electronics. I don't have a thermistor to show you, but you'd basically just slide this guy in there. Have the wires pointing upward like that, and the thermistor goes in the bottom hole, the bulb, and the wires go on either side of that screw, which would be here. And again, don't tighten it all the way down, just kind of snug it down, hold the wires in place, and that's it. Wirings are installed, your electronics are done. You would put your boot back on. I have one right here. I'll just throw it on there just for completion's sake. So we would mount our boot on like that. Okay, this would get bolted back in. And let me get these off of here. There's a jam down here. I might have to cut it off. Let's see if we get it off. Oh, there we go. We got it. Okay. So, make sure this goes in like this. I usually leave it almost tight. Put the tube in, then just snug it down. Now again, with these tubes, this is a good example of a bad cut. This one is not flush at the bottom here. I don't know if you can see it in the camera, but it's not. This end was in the hot end. It's got burnt plastic on it. It comes off, but it's still on there. That's the residue from the tube that we cleaned out. I can feel it's a little bit deformed in its shape, so I would definitely replace this, or if you have the room to just trim it back, trim it back. Now when you trim it back, one second, I grab another tool. Sorry about that. You want to use a tubing cutter for this. It gives you a nice flush cut if you do it right. It's a little tricky, but I usually just put it in like this, and I'll spin it as I squeeze it. So just a little bit of pressure and spin. And you'll get a nice flush cut with one of these tools. These sometimes come with the tubing when you buy them. Alright, so now we got a nice flush cut there. There's also a ridge here from previously being bit. That shouldn't be a big deal. It should slide right through, but if it is, we'll just get another piece of tubing. Alright, so slide that in and all the way down to the bottom. Now I'm going to pull it back out and I'm going to show you how far that went in, because it's important to get it all the way. You'll notice here that went all the way in that far. The reason is it touches the top of the nozzle. You want to make sure that it's actually hitting the top of this nozzle all the way through the tube. And I got some strings on it from pulling that out, and that happens. All the way through the tube down to the top of this nozzle. If there's a gap here like this, you're going to have a buildup of plastic in there. You're going to get a plug, type of a leak, throat plug. So just shove that all the way in. Make sure it's all the way seated. You'll know it won't be able to go any further. And then just snap on your little retainer clip, which I just dropped and can't find again. There it is. Tried to run away from me. Snap on your retainer clip, and that's it. You just bolt this back onto your hot end carriage, and it's reassembled. So as you can see here, this was a long video. We did manage to recover it. Let's pull this off so you can see it. It's not perfectly clean, but it's acceptable. It would work. It would print again. You wouldn't have too much trouble with this. We know that this is set right. We know that this is in right flush cut again. So as far as you're concerned, this hot end is restored. But again, you have to weigh out how much work that was. Is it worth it? When you can just buy these really, really cheap online, already assembled. And the worst thing you'll have to do is maybe take it apart and reset your throat if it isn't right. I would always recommend taking the time to just pull this apart, check that, because a throat clog is caused by those gaps. Alright, so that's going to wrap this video up. I know it was really long and not really super exciting stuff. A lot of weird back and forth with what I was doing. But that's what it's like when you're working on these machines sometimes. I mean, sometimes it's not just, assembly line work. It's doing things a couple times to get it right. But there you go. There's your hot end video. Thanks, guys.